Morning, everybody. Nice to see all of you bright and early here. Are you all having fun? Are you all having fun? Are you all having fun? Come on, be more cheerful, okay? We got a lot of guests here. We got to impress them a little bit. That's better. Thank you. Yeah, have more coffee. Okay, the session we are going to do today is on building global companies from outside of the valley, Silicon Valley, not Klang Valley, and what would it take to do such a thing. Let me just very quickly introduce our panelists for you today. We have Rebeca, you all know who she is. She's a co-founder of Startup Malaysia. We have Jonas. Jonas is the first marketing director and vice president of sales at Skype, and a founder of Gear Up Ventures. And next to him, we have David Fong, who is from iSpring Capital and the former Malaysian Venture Capital Association chairman. And right at the end, last but not the least, we have Seong. Seong is the CEO of Vision New Media. What we're going to do today, I'm just going to run through to give you a brief outline of what we plan to achieve today. Some of the talking points that we will be discussing will be to identify some of the key challenges in building global companies, and we'll ask our Malaysian panelists to talk about some of the challenges facing Malaysian companies first. Then we'll review some of the success stories from companies outside the valley, and that's where we'll be looking to Rebeca and Jonas to talk about some of their experiences. And if we have time, we'll try and establish some of the key ingredients necessary in the ecosystem to create this success. What we're going to do is we're going to start by asking each of the panelists to spend just 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, to express their thoughts on the topic. We'll start off with that. And then we'll have about 20 minutes of a discussion, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Okay? So just to quickly set the context. As you can see, over the last 2 days, Malaysia has a lot of entrepreneurs. In the MSC, we have 2,000 plus companies. In the biotech sector, we have 200 odd companies. Overall, there are probably about 5,000 entrepreneurial ventures in Malaysia. But there are no global success stories in Malaysia, out of Malaysia. And we have had MSC for about 15 years now. There have been some examples of success stories in other parts of Asia. Of course, in India, you have the Infosys, the Tata Consulting. You have hardware companies like Acer from Taiwan or Creative Technologies from Singapore. And we have Skype that came out of Estonia. But really, there have been no, other than this, there have been no global companies out of Southeast Asia, at least not over the last 10 years. So how can we create globally successful companies from outside Silicon Valley? Because when we talk about global companies, they all seem to be coming from Silicon Valley itself. So how can we create successful companies out of Klang Valley, for example? Okay? So we'll then ask the panelists to share some of their thoughts and their experiences on this topic. And maybe I can start with our Malaysian panelists. We'll start from Seong from the other end. Seong, can you share some of your experiences, please?
Yeah, hi. Some of you know me. I'm Seong from Vision New Media. We're a company that's been in the business of content creation for the past 26 years. So actually, I started in 1985 when we didn't have the internet and we only had a telex machine to communicate with the world. Then we had faxes, and then we had email many years later. So my story actually isn't so much about going global as going regional first. And all the challenges that we faced actually as a brick and mortar business before we had the opportunity through technology to communicate directly with consumers. Most of my content actually gets delivered to broadcasters who in turn then address a consumer market. So a lot of my business is actually B2B. Having said that, in the context of today's world of ultimate connectivity, where you can address individuals on a one-to-one basis, I think the fundamental issues remain. And in trying to be global, they're actually not technology related. And I can provide some anecdotal examples of what helped me become regional and hopefully global. The first was actually the ability to communicate. It isn't actually about technology, it's about your ability to tell your story. as we started a company with 2 or 3 people struggling to actually establish a distribution business, one of the most important things was to be able to communicate effectively with our clients. The biggest compliment that was ever paid to me was actually by a client, the buyer in TVB Hong Kong, who said, introducing me to some of her friends, "I want you to meet Seong. He writes the best faxes in the business." So, right, number one, it's about faxing. And two, however, the important thing is that we were recognized for our ability to communicate clearly. That's one. The other, actually, the challenge that we face as a Malaysian company is one of mindset. Being used to a very small market, we are somewhat constrained by our local limitations in that we're talking to smaller broadcasters, smaller customers who have a much smaller financial base, the result of which we think small. So the mindset issue has to change, because it took me actually many years before I realized that many of the things that I was doing here could actually translate into a larger market. So I think communication and mindset would be the 2 things that I would say Malaysian companies need to tackle most.
Okay. Thank you, Seong. David?
Thank you, Siva. Good morning, everyone. My name is David, and I'm a venture capitalist, though I do a lot less investing today. Like Seong, we started life in the old economy before the internet was here, and so I thought perhaps I'll just give a little bit of my perspective, having seen how the whole industry has gone from pre-tech to tech today, and some of the challenges that we have. I remember in the late 90s when the internet tsunami, as it was popular called in those days, first hit Asia. There was a lot of excitement and anticipation with regard to how it would have an impact and even transform Asian economies. And there was a lot of expectation that it would bring along with it the Silicon Valley culture of entrepreneurship, and implicitly we would see eventually the emergence of an Asian global tech company. I remember particularly one quote or one description during that time which sums up the great expectations that was prevailing, and it was basically that the 21st century would be the golden era for the Asian entrepreneur. It was quite a far-reaching statement, and of course since then we have seen a truly remarkable transformation across many parts of Asia, more so in the more developed and emerging economies. And the internet really has spawned a whole new generation of Asian entrepreneurs, and along with it many new business models which we are seeing here today. But today, as we near the end of year 11 of the new century, Asian companies are for sure making waves in the global scene. And when I say Asian companies, I suppose I mean really more the China companies, because China companies in the last couple of years have been really making a big impact on the global scene in terms of fundraising. For example, in 2010, China companies accounted for nearly half of the funds raised globally from IPOs, and in that particular year, nearly a third of US IPOs were China companies. And today, some of the largest companies by market cap are China companies like Baidu, which is nearly 50 billion US dollars, and Alibaba, the largest e-commerce companies in China, more than 30 billion US dollars. But despite all this seemingly success of China/Asian companies, can we truly say that we are seeing the emergence of Asian global tech companies that can emulate the success of the global, the US giants? Perhaps I can put the question in another way to the audience, just for thinking, is that over the last 10 years, who can we think of as an Asian company that has emerged and become a truly Asian company? And if some of you think that 10 years is too short a time to become a global company, let me remind you that Google has just become a teenager. It was founded in 1998, and in a short space of 13 years, they have become a truly global company with revenues of nearly 30 billion US dollars from all over the world. So time is not a constraint. For the purposes of the panel discussion today, I wanted to just throw 2 personal observations into the pot for discussion. The first of which is that the Chinese companies that we have talked about certainly are comparable to many of the US tech giants in terms of market capitalization, but having a large market capitalization doesn't mean that you are a global company. Even as companies like Alibaba continue to try to expand beyond China, they are still largely focused on China. They are a Chinese-centric company, and they will continue to do so for the simple reason that it's a huge market. It provides the greatest upside for them, and that's why they have such a huge valuation. If you look beyond China, we begin to really struggle to find examples of Asian tech companies that have really become global. One that immediately springs to mind that is anywhere close to the idea of Google would be a company called Creative Technology, which some of you may have heard of. It got listed in the early 90s on NASDAQ, and for most of the 90s, it was a dominant force in the global audio PC market, and one of my earlier VC funds, we invested in it, so it was a huge home run for us. But despite, and it's good, and Creative was a Singapore company, and in the subsequent years, despite the Singapore government having spent huge amount of resources and money in trying to turn Singapore into an innovative and entrepreneurial society, it has really struggled to create more successes like Creative Technology. And it's similar in other parts of Asia. Malaysia, for example, has also spent, since the late 1990s, spent a lot of money in trying to replicate the Silicon Valley formula, including building the multimedia super corridor and devoting huge amount of money, more than $1 billion to venture capital funding in an effort to create world-class companies, our favorite phrase. The results have been quite disappointing. So perhaps the first observation I would make is that forgetting your Sonys and your Samsungs and your Acers, because these are from the earlier time, pre-internet, we have not, for now anyway, seen the emergence of a truly Asian tech company. The other observation that I would make would be that, interestingly, we have more success in finding non-tech examples of Asian companies which have successfully gone global. Not many of you would have heard of this company called Tia Jia Food Manufacturing, but today is the largest maker of spring roll skins in the world. It makes about 35 million spring roll skins a year, every day, from its factories in Singapore, Malaysia, China, and the US even. And it's made its founder into one of the billionaires of Singapore. It's a very good, amazing example of a homegrown company in Singapore that has truly grown global. Likewise, in Singapore, another company, High Flux, which is a water treatment specialist. They today have operations all across Asia, tremendously successful. In Malaysia, we have also examples of homegrown non-tech success stories. Air Asia, which was almost a bankrupt company in 2001, has had a remarkable turnaround since then by our own equivalent of Richard Branson. And today it is the biggest low-budget carrier in Asia, worth more than $1 billion. Largest manufacturer of gloves in the world, they're all in Malaysia, and so on and so on. And you can find many examples of non-tech success stories in Asia that have gone global. So clearly, we can have products or services in Asia that the world wants, but seemingly not when it comes to tech. And it's just an interesting observation. It's clearly too early to conclude that Asia is not going to have the same kind of successes as the US and other parts of the developed world in terms of coming up with global tech companies. Today, technology has made expanding into new markets much easier, and with globalization, they have no choice but to expand from beyond the home market. Yet, many Asian tech companies seem to struggle to become global, and it's an interesting point. And as a VC, and speaking on behalf of many of the VCs here who are still looking for the first big home run, it is an area that is of great concern to us, because if this doesn't happen soon, then we may decide to start looking into non-tech companies to invest in as VCs, and then what would happen to the whole infrastructure. So just some food for thought and for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Jonas?
Thank you very much. Well, I'm Jonas Kjellberg. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've actually started companies all my life, but I think the biggest impact was when I was part of starting Skype, which actually started in a small apartment in Stockholm. But prior to that, I actually listed one company, sold the other to Vodafone. So I had done a lot of entrepreneurial stuff before. And after that, I've started to invest some of my money with limited success. So we have a lot of companies that I've invested in. which is a very interesting challenge. And I think one remark there is that, you know, even if it's not just putting in money, it's a lot of work. Maybe you think that when you get your first money, I'll just invest so I don't have to work, but it's actually a lot of work. But my latest venture right now is I'm spending a lot of energy and money in investing in the educational sector, and I'm writing a book together with Professor Tom Kosnick, which Rebecca is also teaching in his classes, about actually much of the academic experience of building a company, and then also with my own experience, what does it take to build a global company? And I think that's the question we should ask ourselves today, and hopefully think, what can we do about it? But the first thing, I think, you need to do a product that everybody loves. I think that's where you need to go back and actually start with. What's your delight? What are you creating that no one else has done? And I think you have to look at the consumer. It's like always delight the user, and then you will delight the shareholder. Because I think if you're always looking for going for the short cash, you're looking too short. You always need to see, okay, what kind of pain is there out there with the things that I have, and how can we do better? You know, when we started Skype, no one actually thought we'd ever get funding. We had a really hard time getting funded because, I don't know if you remember, but NetMeeting, Microsoft's product at that point, was on every PC around the world. So when you met the VCs, they said, oh, guys, you're mad. But we still believed that there was something we could do better. There was a pain point in calling internet telephony. So I think that's the first key issue. What is your delight? What is the storytelling that you have? And how can you get others to love your product? Start with that. And start by trying to innovate and not imitate. And I think that's also a very, very important part. Innovate in things you have, in everything you do, and try not to imitate. That's the first part. Second part is customer acquisition. And here I think that's my observation of being a non-US citizen is that's where the US guys are really, really good. And that's where we have a lot of things to learn. They're very, very good in customer acquisition. Always thinking, how can we add the next customer? Where can we add it, and how fast can we do it? I think, especially being a technician, I spend a lot of time, you know, looking at the technology, but here is where they exceed and are the best in the world. Always constantly adding customers and always trying to innovate in the way you can add customers. So that's the second thought. As an entrepreneur, you need to think, okay, how do I add customers faster? And when you think about that, I think the third part of that cartwheel is actually partners. How can you add partners that are global partners directly? And I think that's also a very important lesson from the Skype story. We added partners like Tom.com, PC Home, and how can you set up yourself of being a good partner to accelerate your business? Because sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, you always think, okay, but I'm doing this myself, I have to build it organic. But that's often very slow. You know, you have to get an office in Silicon Valley, you need to get just getting a bank account in the US or being a non-US citizen is a hassle. You know? So it's like, how can you accelerate your business faster by working with others? And how can you find something that matches what others do is one of my very, very important lessons. So I think those are the three basic parts. And then also, be global in your thoughts from day one. Think global, act global. You know, get people that have different cultures into your team. Move to Malaysia. If you want to do business there, you have to be here. If you want to do business in the US, you have to have someone in New York, you have to have someone in Silicon Valley. If you want to do business with Chinese, you have to be in Shanghai or Beijing, at least. So I think, you know, travel the world as early as possible and see if your customers, if they love your product here, they probably love your product in Sweden as well. Or why don't they? Figure that out as fast as possible. And if they don't like it, if they only like it here, well, then stay here. If they like it all over the world, you know, try to capture the whole world. So I think that's some short, basic advice. But it's a hard and tough journey. Trust me, I'm an entrepreneur again. It's always problems and solutions you need to find.
Thank you. A lot of good thoughts in just a few minutes, so there's a lot for us to digest. Thank you, Jonas. Rebecca?
Sure. What I would like to maybe set as a context is when we talk about being global, what is it really that we're talking about? Is it a global team, founding team, where you have international people joining and working remotely to form a startup? Are we talking about global investors, where we go on roadshows and get Silicon Valley angels, VCs, and maybe advisors and mentors to be part of our company? Or are we talking about just a global mindset, as you said, where we look at a global market? And I believe we're talking about all three of those. And I wanted to share the experience of how YouNoodle was started as a global company, because there are some good anecdotes there. I met my co-founder in 2007. He's English, from the UK, at a conference just like this. So we were in a conference in Buenos Aires. We met, a year passed by, nothing much happened. But in Norway, we met again, and we crossed paths. And at that time, we happened to have the same pain point that we wanted to solve, which was that there was no virtual platform for entrepreneurs at universities to showcase their profiles and their projects. So we talked. He had his own global team in Silicon Valley. I had a team that had members in Buenos Aires and London. And during 3 days over the conference, we were trying to recruit each other. Tell them, your team is actually not good enough. Come join me. No. Your team is actually not an A team. Come join me. And that struggle lasted literally 3 days without sleep. And I caved, and we ended up starting a company. So the founding team was initially in 3 different time zones. We had a person in Buenos Aires, a person in London from Oxford, and 2 people in Silicon Valley. So the way we did it was through Skype. Thank you. Every Saturday we would meet in 3 different time zones. So we had to block out almost 18 hours during that day to hold our meetings, and on top of our full-time jobs. So for about 3 months, we worked on that to produce our first alpha version of the product. And in July, we went on fundraising trips until we secured funding quite quickly. Remember, this is 2007, so it was still quite easy to get revenue, to get funding before pre-revenue. And we got together, we went full time. So the first founding team had 5 members. We had somebody from England, somebody from Russia who had double nationality, English, Russian. Myself, I'm Korean, Argentine. We had 1 Danish person who lived in London. And then we realized we don't have an American, and we're in Silicon Valley, so we should get 1 token American. So we went and recruited an American high school dropout. So he had started his company when he was 16 years old, and hadn't even applied to college. But he was a really good coder from a very small town called Vacaville, 200 people. So it's as American as it gets. And that's how we formed our 5-member international team. Our investors were global. We had a lead investor from Korea and several investors in Silicon Valley. Peter Thiel was one of them. Max Levchin was another one, the PayPal founders. And then we went full time. So one of the struggles with this, well, first of all, in the US, was really difficult to get visas. It's one of the main pain points to get the right work authorization to be in the US. So that makes other places like Malaysia very attractive to form global teams. And the second thing is that it's actually, there are a lot of cultural background issues that comes up when you have a global team. There are things that you assume to be a standard for other people in your team, but you have to really work through the baseline, really where is it that you agree on, and what are the things that you have to say explicitly that maybe in my culture, they don't even need to be said out loud. But having said that, I think many companies think, going global is good, and let's go global as soon as possible. But it's not always the case. When to go global is a very, very important question. If you look at companies like Groupon, for example, that have faced a lot of local competition of companies that are doing similar things, and they have actually struggled to enter markets. And so timing is actually very important, and I would love to hear the thoughts of the panel and your questions on when and how to go global to optimize your chances to success.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So we have a lot of issues that, many thoughts that you have brought up. Let me just quickly run through some of those that I've actually looked at. I mean, I've identified from what you have said. the first thing is mindset, right? Don't think small, and Jonas was saying, you know, be global, think global, act global. Communication and telling better stories. David has said that, you know, there are some big companies, like for example from China, but they're not really global, you know. They are large companies, highly capitalized, but they're still only mainly Chinese companies. Jonas is talking about build a product that everybody loves, right? And what is your delight, and innovate and don't just imitate. Although, you know, in Asia, most people actually do imitate a lot, and you can be fairly successful imitating as well. And how do you add global customers, and how do you add global partners? Rebecca was talking about cultural issues, about building global teams, and about timing. Yeah? So if you look at it, there's quite a lot of issues in relation to actually becoming a global company. Yeah? But maybe if you look at, say, the Malaysian context, since we are here in Malaysia and you're all mostly Malaysian entrepreneurs, in terms of the Malaysian context, what would be the biggest challenges that Malaysian companies face in terms of trying to achieve some of these things? You know, is it just a mindset issue? Yes, there are mindset issues, but I think we have started changing mindset issues these days. More companies are starting to think global and try to be more global from the beginning, the sort of born global companies. Yeah? They're trying to go global. Funding might be an issue. Okay? So maybe we can ask Seong, as an entrepreneur, what are the biggest challenges you have actually faced in trying to regionalize your company?
Okay, I'll speak both for myself and perhaps more generally as well as a Malaysian. The first, I think, has to do, we've talked about the mindset issues, and Rebecca's brought up culture. In association with culture, I think the fact is the Malaysian market is very small. With 28 million people, you know, the numbers are small, the revenues are small. And unfortunately, we grow up in this environment, and therefore we think small, because that's as far as we can see. So the first thing actually is to overcome that. Now, there are also cultural issues. In terms of how we're brought up, we're actually brought up not to think very widely. You know, I mean, it's the Asian Confucian thing, you know, do what you're told, don't ask questions. And the result of which is we're actually brought up in a system that doesn't actually encourage wide or global thinking. So that's the first thing we need to overcome. So as a Malaysian company, we actually start from 2 steps back. The second thing has to do with the fact that there is actually insufficient exposure. So while you can say that, oh, come on, that's the internet, we're completely connected nowadays, you know, political regimes are actually toppled by the internet. Having said that, you know, there are still cultural issues, and there is still a lack of awareness of what being global means. Jonas brought this up. You want to know about Malaysia, come to Malaysia. You want to know about Korea, go to Korea. And the fact of the matter is Malaysians aren't very widely traveled. So the employees that I have, you know, are somewhat constrained in their ability to imagine some of the things that I'm talking about. So even if I have the advantage of exposure, not all of my employees do. And so it's difficult, therefore, to translate a vision into practice or a plan because of these issues. So, I mean, those are the things that I feel are what, you know, hold Malaysia back. So these are the things that we need to address. How do we address them? I mean, Malaysia's been tackling this problem. Singapore's been tackling this problem, you know, about exposure, about bringing Silicon Valley here, for example. And these are many of the things that happen. But it's going to take a while. The first thing, however, that we need to address are actually the mindset issues.
Okay. In terms of the market, I mean, we all know the Malaysian market is small. But if you're in technology, right, a technology product is a born global product. You can really globalize software, for example. Or if you're in the internet business, you can be global straight away. So the market should not be stopping us anymore these days, right? In terms of talent, you know, do you think we have enough talent in Malaysia? Because, you know, a lot of Malaysians have gone abroad, they've studied abroad, they've lived abroad, they've come back to Malaysia. So that mindset and the thinking of, you know, from a foreign country or whether America or UK, do you think there's enough talent in Malaysia with that kind of thinking already? And should they be in these teams? You know, maybe Seong and maybe David can address that as well.
Yeah, just quickly. No, I don't think there is enough talent. I think there's still a lot more talent out there that is Malaysian that needs to be here. Two, there needs to be a depth as well. So it's not just about breadth. So I think we do have a fairly high level and a thin layer of people who are global in their thinking mentality. But when it comes to actually doing the hard work, right, you've got to follow through. You've got to be able to deliver the goods. And that's where I think we have a dearth of talent.
If I may add to that in terms of the mindset and the talent. So the typical, we hired Sam, as I mentioned, the 18-year-old high school dropout, because when we interviewed him and I asked him, so what do you want to be? You know, what do you want to be when you're 25 or 20? He said, I want to have my first million before I'm 20. I want to build a company as big as Twitter or Facebook, right? So that's a very actually typical mindset of students in America when you go to Stanford or Berkeley or MIT. It's not so much the case when you go abroad. People are more focused on the local context, but it's not a problem without a fairly straightforward solution. So I'll tell you another story. We had a student, a PhD student from Mexico who was in Saudi Arabia. We have this program for a month. And we give them this immersion experience in San Francisco and Silicon Valley where they can go to many different companies and startups. And at the end of the program, he came to me and said, Rebecca, I have to say I hate you because before coming to this camp, I was a happy PhD student, you know, thinking I'm going to be an academic and have a good life. But now I went to Google, and I don't think I'll ever be happy without building something as big as that. So you really ruined my life. So with that, I'm saying that exposure, as you said, is very, very important. If you put people together in one room, amazing things can happen.
And hopefully you'll create some of that over this weekend as well? Yes. Okay. David, do you have anything to add?
I think it's easy to forget sometimes that even though we seem to have been doing this entrepreneur thing for a long time, it's really relatively a new concept in Asia. And if you compare to Silicon Valley, they've had 60 years to evolve into what they are today. And until 10 years ago, Asia was not really, most of Asia anyway, was not really an innovative economy. We were doing basic things like manufacturing and just concentrating on survival rather than being innovative. So it's a very new thing to us. And it's very difficult to expect that in a short space of 10, 15 years, somebody can have the same level of understanding and entrepreneurial drive as somebody in Silicon Valley who's been exposed and grown up in the culture, the point Seong was making. And having started investing as a VC in the late 90s, we have certainly seen an evolution of the mindset of the average entrepreneur in Malaysia. In the early days, for example, everybody had very simple, shallow ideas. We call them Me Too ideas, you know, just saying, I also want to be a search engine or whatever, just copy something in the US. And at the end of the day, many of these ideas fail. Today, we have moved a little bit beyond that. In the early days, nobody knew about how to run a company. Nobody knew about VC funding. Nobody knew about how to approach a VC and so on and so on. As a result of which, most of the people that came to see VCs, we said, how can I fund you? You don't even know how to articulate your idea and so forth and so forth. Again, we've seen that evolving today when we meet people, they're older, maybe they are starting their second business or even third business. Not quite a serial entrepreneur as Jonas, but on the way. One advantage that a country like Malaysia has compared to some other Asian countries to address this lack of talent is we have not been able to attract back many of the Malaysians who are overseas now. If you look at China and India and Vietnam, one of the reasons why they've so quickly been able to develop successful businesses is the returning immigrants, whether they're the Vietnamese. Sorry, I forget Taiwan, of course. Taiwan was the earliest examples of Taiwanese who worked in the valley and come back to Taiwan, and that's why Taiwan became so successful early on. China, returning Chinese, India, returning Indians, and most recently, Vietnamese. And these people, they come back with all the knowledge and experience of what it takes to be an entrepreneur in the valley, and they rub that idea off to their local people. So there's a lot of cross-mix of ideas. In Malaysia, we too have many Malaysians who are talented outside Malaysia, in Singapore, even the valley, but for reasons that we will discuss elsewhere, we have not been very successful at bringing them back to Malaysia. And to me, that's a very easy short-term solution if we can attract even a small portion of them back. Certainly, they would make some of the companies here more attractive to VCs if you have a Malaysian who's worked in the valley.
Thank you. Now, this whole issue about mindsets, you know, I'm not sure I will really agree with that. So I want the audience to answer a few questions for me to see whether you guys have the right mindset, okay? The first thought we had was, you know, that, like Rebecca said, you know, this guy, he wants to make his first million, you know, before he's 20. How many of you want to make your first 10 million in the next 5 years? Can I have a show of hands, please? So, you know, there are at least people here who are actually thinking, you know, I want to make it big, you know, I want to make money, okay? Now, how many of you have traveled to at least 5 countries in your lifetime so far? Okay. So, I mean, if you really look at the audience, and the reason I ask a question is because, you know, I've been training entrepreneurs for the last 3 or 4 years. I must have trained about 400 odd entrepreneurs. And I find that the mindset is actually there. So they actually are willing to work hard. They want to make money. They want to build global companies, okay? So the mindset among at least the entrepreneurs who are here and many of the people I've spoken to, it is already there, yeah? And many of them already do have exposure. And you know, with AirAsia flying around the region is so cheap, many of them have done it already. So the exposure is there, maybe not enough in terms of the culture or the business part of being in the region. But I think, you know, they have the right mindset in wanting to build businesses, you know. Jonas, can I ask you, you've been in many countries, Sweden, Estonia, America, and so on. What do you think, is there anything special about the people or the talent in these countries that might be different from the talent in Malaysia that might hold Malaysians back or anything?
No, I don't think so. There is a reason I'm here, and I think the next big companies will actually come from this region. And if you go back to yourself and think about entrepreneurship, you have a lot of entrepreneurship today, but the thing is, it's not in high tech. There's a lot of restaurants, there are a lot of people actually working to actually provide food on the table for everyone. And for me, that's also entrepreneurship. It's more about taking that next step from that entrepreneurship into actually doing high-tech companies. The second thing I would also say is that entrepreneurship is not about making money, trust me. It's about solving a passion and solving a problem that you see. Because if you want to make money, I would suggest you go and work for an investment bank. That's a much easier way of actually doing that. Because there's so much time and energy you want to spend as an entrepreneur. Most of the time is misery. You don't know how to actually get past the next day. And I think you forget that. And if you don't have the passion of actually believing in what you're doing, you will never succeed. And the second thing, I think in this region, you've been really, really good at imitating. And I think if you can just take it to the next level and start innovating, because you already have the technology, you have the possibility of building all these things in place already. So if you think that unparalleled thinking and dare to think beyond, and not just what others are doing and looking what others are doing, but thinking just not one step ahead, but 4 or 5 years ahead, and what will actually change, and like think beyond what is today. And if you start doing that, with the talent you have here, wow, you know, I would say, you know, US, be afraid. But it's a mindset perspective, yes. But it's also having the courage of taking those steps. But talent, yes, I definitely think there's a lot of talent here.
Thank you. Seong?
Thank you, Jonas, because I think you touch on many of the things that are very close to my heart. And Malaysia's, you know, decided that innovation is going to be not just something we talk about, but we're actually building it into our culture. I mean, from the top down. And actually, in doing this, I've been forced to think about what innovation really is. And there is a difference between innovation and invention. Innovation is a lot more workman-like in its approach, I think, and I'm happy about that because I come from a bricks and mortar background and I'm old. But what's interesting is that in the 60s, the Ministry of Defense in the States actually came up with a definition of what innovation is, which I think is relevant and exactly along the lines that you say. The first thing is it has to address a need, translate that into a desire or something, like you say, something that somebody actually wants. The second is actually competent people, all right, with the right technology. So I think you say talent now exists, and absolutely the technology does. The last thing, though, is the one that maybe it's literally the billion-dollar question. It's give them the money to do it with. So, you know, let's maybe take the discussion down that road in terms of funding.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the next thing I was going to touch on, you know, in terms of the ecosystem.
And we did not talk before this.
Yes. Let me give you a story. I'm actually mentoring a company. I mentor several companies, but I'm actually mentoring a company. They are in the education space somewhat. And they have built a company. They have tested the business model. The first iteration didn't work quite well. The second iteration is a lot better. And this company has actually gone out to try and raise some funds from angels. Now, David will tell you that there are probably less than 5 VCs in Malaysia actually with money to invest. 5, okay? So that's not a lot of VC money. But this company has gone out to see a lot of angels. And the concept of angels here seems to be different, because most of the angels that we've approached seem to think that, you know, oh, if you haven't got a lot of revenue or if you're not profitable, you know, come back to us when you're already profitable, and then we'll look at you, you know. So, and most of the angels that we've spoken to say, yeah, we love the idea. One of them said, it's got legs. So that's a big joke with us now, it's got legs. But no one's willing to bet on this horse. You know, no one is willing to put, not a lot of money, you know, we're asking for like 170,000 US dollars. But no one is willing to put 170,000 US dollars into this company that's already in 3 markets, Malaysia, Indonesia, and India, you know, to build an Asia-wide business. Now, without the money, this company might not last another year, you know. So how do we build companies if there are only 5 VCs in this country and angels are not willing to invest until the companies are profitable? So how will we do it, and what are your experiences? Maybe, Rebecca, you can share some of your experience, and then we can ask Jonas as well.
Of course, of course. I think that the issue is where is the money, right? If there is no money in Malaysia, where can we have it? Because institutional changes will take a long time. There is a lot of money in Silicon Valley, and sometimes I do get mad because I see companies that I personally don't see to have the quality that deserves any seed funding, and they would get valuations over $5 million for a seed round. And that really makes me angry, because we have companies outside of the Silicon Valley area that maybe could use that money in much better ways. But there is no access for people who don't have a connection to Silicon Valley to easily interact and liaise with investors. Remember what Naval said yesterday, and this resonated with most of the angels in the group. If I don't know you, I won't invest in you. If I don't understand the local context or the laws or the culture, then I feel very afraid to engage with you in that partnership. So the best strategy to access investors in Silicon Valley is to have somebody who knows somebody. You would be surprised if you, for example, talk to Constantine or Jeff or Naval, and you go to an investor and say, I'm introduced to you via Naval, and he thinks I'm a good company. That will open 10 times more doors than you going and pitching your story cold. So connections are very important. This is why we have this conference, exactly for that, so that this context is also a part of the education process that Silicon Valley angels can go through. So anything you do, any conversation you have to strive to impress one person. You need one champion, and very suddenly in Silicon Valley you'll be accessing the elite network. And sometimes it's even counterintuitive. It's not always in business settings. I always tell people that come to visit the Bay Area that instead of going to networking events, they should be playing poker, because all of the decisions happen during poker games on Thursday nights, you know, with all of the main angels. So it's being really strategic. The second thing I think is in learning how to tell your story. We'll talk more about that during the panel in the afternoon. But in American Silicon Valley, we're very much used to giving a very quick snapshot of who you are, who knows you, who validates you, what your product is, and why should anybody care? Why is the market big? And all of that in less than 60 seconds, right? So in your first pitch, you're giving almost like a photograph, like a picture of where you stand as a company. And that's done quite well in a very trained way in Silicon Valley. And that will help you access resources a lot. Sometimes a lot of the entrepreneurs are so caught up in their product and so excited about their technology that they spend most of the time showing the little, features that really, don't give the full picture. But the first thing is they want to know who are you, who knows you, and why should I talk to you? Because before the trust, I won't even engage in a conversation with you.
Thank you. Jonas?
Well, I agree a lot with what Rebecca says, but I'll say to you all that are entrepreneurs out there, be prepared of not get funding, and build your business for having a long path with actually no one investing, because VC money is, really scared of losing their money, so they want to see revenues, they want to see a really good company. So you need to really do it on your own, have that mentality, because no one is going to invest money into you. And when they want to invest money, maybe you shouldn't take the money, because then your business is good enough. So I think that's the first thought. Second thing, champions, of course, you need to get people to endorse your product, just customers, but also other VCs, lawyers, whoever it is, which is an important part. And I think that's how the system works. Is if you have a good product, people will tell others about it. I'll call up and say, hey, man, this is a great thing. I looked into it, maybe you should invest into it. So I think that's important. And second thing, if the money's not here, go to where the money is. It's not more difficult than that, And this is a story as well. We went round to Swedish VCs, and they're like, hey, you don't have a business model. This IP telephony thing's been going on for 10 years, hasn't taken off. And then we had to go somewhere else with a bigger mindset. So do that. Travel to the US. But you can't just go there once and think you're going to go home with money. You have to go there 10 times. You need to build those relationships. You need to get that US lawyers, and you can do the introductions. So it's not by just going around and target the guys that you want to have on board. And then come, as Rebecca says, with a good story. This is how we're going to change the world. This is what we're going to do. And this is our beliefs. And if you don't believe in it, great, goodbye. But this is what we're going to do. And be passionate about it. But it's not just going to take one meeting. You won't go to the Silicon Valley, come home with $5 million. It's not going to happen. If not, if you don't have the relationships. You need to go there over and over and over again. So that would be my, it's like raising money is like convincing customers to buy. It's the same thing. If you can't convince the customers, you can't convince the VCs. So go to where the money is and start building those bridges as early on is my advice when it comes to.
I would really like to emphasize that point. It's a numbers game, and this is not just a situation for international people coming to Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, people knock at as many doors as possible. Typically, they say that a rule of thumb is that about 25 meetings that you have, maybe you'll get 3 to 5 meetings that will go to a second meeting, and then you may get 1 or 2 term sheets. So. It's just that we have more of those investors in the Bay Area, so you can just keep going and knocking at more doors. But even in Silicon Valley, it's not so easy. People have to be very persistent and just go after everybody they can.
Yeah, I think also sometimes that is underestimated. You think that the money is so easy to get in Silicon Valley. No, it's not. I would say sometimes it's easier for me to get money in Sweden nowadays because the investors are not as strong and want to be part of a global success. So, and the second thing is, like, even if it's a numbers game, be really targeted on who you talk to and why you want to talk to them. And have a good story of why you should talk to them and what you can add to them, not what they can add to you. Because in the end, the VCs, they're there because they want to spend $1 and they want to have 2. Basically, they don't really give a shit about your product,
Thank you. Thank you, Jonas. Just a quick question, Jonas. Are you looking to invest in this region?
Well, yeah, I try to invest as many ideas as I can. The challenge here for me as a person is I'm very passionate in what I do, and I don't. If I invest just giving away money, I could invest it in the stock market. I never understood that, so I try to invest things where I am passionate about, but also where I have. And this is a limitation because I tend to invest in where I have people close by, so I can work with the company on a daily basis because I enjoy it, and that's also a way I can add value. Otherwise, it's just money, and and then go somewhere else, I think, because that is a challenge, because it's hard investing in companies when you're not there on a day-to-day basis. You can't just drive by, you know. The crisis, they don't come when you schedule.
They come when you least expect it. Okay, we have about 15 minutes. Maybe we can open up questions to the floor. Let me just set some ground rules, please. Just mention your name and ask your question, and do it in 30 seconds. Please don't make speeches, because we only have 15 minutes. We like to give everyone a chance. Okay? So who's going to start?
I'll start if I can.
Okay.
I'm going to be politically incorrect. I'm trying to identify what are the differences between economies that have produced global tech companies as we have defined them just now, and the companies in Asia. I don't think it's just mindset. I know this conference is being co-organized with MDEC. Have we seen success stories come out of economies where big government is involved?
Okay. Would any of the panelists like to take that question? Because in Malaysia, it's big government, right? Government does a lot for entrepreneurship. Would anyone like to take that question?
Hello.
I'll try to be brave and take this on. Mainly because I have actually been a beneficiary of the Malaysian model. In that, I think Malaysia is incredibly lucky in having a government that is actually prepared to put out. I've benefited from it. Zubir, my favorite banker, sitting here because he funded a huge project I brought here. I brought Codemasters to this country. We have a studio here that's been going for several years now, and we're on the global map in producing console games. Without actually the MSC project and the fact that we had both, you know, debt money, which was developmental in nature, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Having said that, in spite of all of this, we've had very few successes. We have to agree. From my perspective, I think, yes, government can only take it so far. And I think Malaysia has provided, the grease that turns those wheels, a lot of money. Unfortunately, government cannot be expected to have specific domain knowledge. And this is where there has, if we've gone wrong, it's in the area of government trying to take it a little bit too far. Government cannot be expected to do the business on behalf of our companies. But very often, our companies expect government to do that for us. All right? What do I mean? I mean, we've had many people, including in MDEC, try to go out there and say, okay, we're going to open the market up for you. As Jonas has said, it's not about somebody else going to the market and trying to open it up for you. It's actually about you doing it, you being passionate about it, and you actually going beyond the pale. And I think that's where we fall. So, number one, I think to answer that question, I think Malaysia is a wonderful place in terms of the opportunities that exist. Unfortunately, we waste those opportunities because government's been expected to do too much, or government's expecting itself to do too much, making itself into something that it isn't. Two, our entrepreneurs don't yet, or are not yet prepared to go beyond where they need to be. Even in Silicon Valley, Rebecca and Jonas are saying that it's very hard to raise money. All right? There is money here, but guess what? For example, in my case, I've actually brought, instead of going to the money, I've brought the money here. On Monday, I've set a meeting up for a fund, okay, that is new, that's looking to make investments in Asia in the media sector. I'm bringing them here to meet with our National Sovereign Fund. And is that my job? I mean, I'm a businessman, okay? But in order for me to do the next thing that I want to do, I need funding that I don't have, that actually isn't available in the current system here. So I went looking for this money. And I need to bring it back here because it needs to function in this environment. So in order to do my business, and this has actually been the history of our company Vision, we've had to do somebody else's business in order to do ours. So I hope in some ways I've answered your question.
Rebecca?
I actually have a couple of examples of governments. Government has a good role in setting the ecosystem to be right. And by that I mean to actually give the most freedom to the entrepreneurs to have discretion and flexibility to create their companies. Chile, for example, is a good case study. We still don't know the results because it's a new program, but they put together a fund to help entrepreneurs who are going to Chile and spending 6 months there. And they really understood the DNA of the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs don't want to go and commit, really marry the country, right? They don't want to go and spend a few months, work on their companies, and if they want to stay, they will stay. So the government of Chile said, I will give you $40,000, you come to Chile, spend 6 months, and no strings attached. It's friends with benefits, no marriage, I'm not asking for commitment. You come and you'll get the money. You don't have to hire locally, you don't have to spend the money in Chile. Really, you don't even have to incorporate in Chile. And that has caused a big stir, and there are about 1,000 companies that applied to go, really high quality companies, and already 200 companies are on their way to Chile. This is in less than 12 months. So if the government gets it right, which is, let's provide the ecosystem, let's provide the funding without setting any restrictions, then I think that combination works well.
Okay, we seem to have a queue at all the mics, so this is how we're going to do this. Okay, ask your question very quickly. We'll go from that mic to this mic to that mic, and then we go back and forth, okay? So the next one is the gentleman over here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ryan Harris from warehouse.com. I'm about to launch my service here locally, but you guys were talking about going global. Do you really suggest that I launch my service both locally and globally? Thank you.
What is your service?
Warehouse.com actually provide a storage service for students for every semester break.
Sorry, what service again?
Storage service.
Storage service.
Yeah, for students every semester break.
Physical storage service.
Physical storage service.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Given that the business model seems to be execution oriented, that you need to have a lot of service providers lined up here locally, I would probably suggest that you understand the model and perfect the model here first before you export that know-how and IP to the rest of the world. Any other thing?
Well, I to some extent agree, but it's in the end, where are your customers? Where do you have most of your customers? Are they here or where are they? I think that's, if you can answer that question, to whom are you selling this product? If you answer that very simple, then you will actually define your own question.
Go to where the market really is, the biggest market for you probably. Over there, please.
Good morning, I'm Joa. We have 4 questions here. The first one is, can we have your book?
You can only ask one question, okay? I got a long queue here. One question.
Okay, the front part is, Jonas, can we have your book? And the second part is, how you manage your managing competition. Is there any strategy suggest? Thank you.
Strategies to manage competition.
Sorry, can you repeat?
First, he wants a copy of your book.
Yeah, you can have that.
Okay.
You can order it on the gearupventures.com. So I had the opportunity to say that as well.
Jonas is an entrepreneur as well, okay. Second is, do you have any advice for competition, how to handle competition?
Well, I think there's I'm very intrigued about basically trying to define how is the competition. I think are you in a blue ocean? Are you in a red ocean? So the whole red ocean, blue ocean strategy, I think you could definitely look into. The second thing I think you need to think about, are you an outperformer playing in an existing market, or are you a game changer? I think that's something you need to ask yourself, because a lot of people enter into a market where they need to be outperformers. Basically, you're taking an existing idea, but then you just need to execute it better than everybody else, and that's really tough. I've been a slacker all my life, so I always need to be a game changer because I have to play where no one else is playing. So that would be my answer. Are you an outperformer as a person, or are you a game changer? And if you're an outperformer, congratulations. Go for it and outperform the others. Otherwise, you need to change the game.
Thank you. Okay, back to that side, please.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a software engineer. I'd like to ask a question about technical ability and academics. So, for example, in Silicon Valley, there's tons of Ivy League unis, Stanford, Silicon Valley has this whole culture. And companies like Google, Intel, Sun, and Nuance, who's the backend for Siri in the iPhone 4S, they're all very technical, very highly technical stuff that can come out of research and so on. So I'd like some thoughts on how technical ability and academics relate to entrepreneurship.
How do technical abilities and academics relate to entrepreneurship? As in, should you drop out or should you stay in school?
Or maybe more like the roles of academics and technical ability.
Okay.
Yeah,
any other panelists like to handle that question?
Well, I have both. I have a technical degree, but you know, when we start most companies, they say, "Okay, Jonas, you can't code, so you'll have to do something useless like PR, marketing, or sales." So, but yes, I think technology ability is very important. If you're doing a high-tech company, you need people that can code. So I think that's the basis of most of the people. So that's why a lot of good companies are built around people with very good technology knowledge, and then you have exceptions that, because you need PR, marketing, and sales as well. But unfortunate for me, but.
And I think the question was whether you should pursue a highly technical, in-depth degree in a field like software engineering. A lot of companies in the value really good technical people, and that doesn't have to be a degree. They don't look at whether you have a PhD or a master's. They look at what you have done and how well you can code. But companies, for example, like Facebook, will always try to maintain a very high ratio of engineers versus other stuff. So I think the ratio is about 60% engineers. I may be wrong, maybe it's 50, but it's a very high ratio. And right now, the hottest commodity in Silicon Valley are engineers. So if you're looking for a job, to talk to me. There are a lot of jobs available in Silicon Valley. I'm telling you, there are actually signs outside of the offices of startups saying, free food. If you're an engineer, go upstairs, we're hiring. I'll send you these pictures. So it's a good time for engineers in Silicon Valley, for sure.
Rebecca, we're already short of engineers here. You're taking more of them away.
We'll bring them back.
But they can come back, yeah. Okay, over here, please.
Hi, I'm Fadza from fashionvalley.net. My question is, how would you advise startups to value their company, especially in terms of intangible value? Also, from your experience, how much stake would VCs want for them to show a strong interest in?
Okay, how do you value a company in terms of intangible value, and how much stakes, if they have a strong interest in you, should you give up?
I think the challenge here is it's impossible to value these companies, because if you're not showing any profit, it's very hard to do the basic calculations, and they have actually proven to work. And normally VCs always take 30%, so it's basically, how do you value yourself? It's more, how do you sell yourself and the vision of the future, and also how much money do you need to actually be able to take your company to that step. That's my own experience.
A lot of it is actually a team. In the Valley, you will look at the idea, the market size, the potential, the revenue projections, all of that. But a lot of times, your actual valuation comes from how much confidence the investor has in the team. And depending on that, they will give you a standard valuation. There are prices that fluctuate over time. A lot of the people who give you the recommendation are actually the lawyers. In my case, I remember going to my law firm and asking them, I have no idea what my valuation is right now for my first investment. What do you think the ballpark number is? And they see hundreds of deals, so they are typically able to give you a good ballpark. And then there are third-party valuation companies that do this for a living, so you can also go to them. I mean, they're expensive. You have to pay them to do a thorough valuation, but you can get a formal number for about $4,000.
Okay, thank you. Over there, yes.
Hello, morning. Morning, this is CG. My question is, if you were to restart your business, and what are the first three things that come to your mind in order to grow your business globally with fast speed? And another three things what will you be aware of?
What are the three things to grow your business, and what are the three things you should be aware of? Would anyone like to take the question?
Well, again, do a good product. That's my basic answer. And the hard thing is there to understand, do people actually like it? Because sometimes I love it, but people don't understand it, or vice versa. So I think go back, and first thing that comes to mind, do something that you believe in and you think can accelerate. And that's the first thing that comes to mind. Then you need to you know, check it. Does it work? Does it not work?
David, you
Constant
want to say
iteration.
something?
I totally agree with that. You know, to be a global company just means that you have to be able to sell your product across multiple geographies in different countries. And it's actually quite a big challenge because something that works in your own country may not actually work in other countries. And I think many companies in Malaysia, for example, when they've tried to expand to Southeast Asia, not to mention other parts of the world, have found that there are vast geographical differences in every country. So to find something that is commonly acceptable and in demand amongst various countries, it's a big challenge. And that has to be a starting point, because without that, you can't be a global company.
Actually, I have a couple that are, I feel very strongly about. Work with people you really like. Don't work with people you don't like, because you'll spend a lot of time with these people. And two, talk to customers day one. Even before you build your first prototype, sit down with people who might use the product that you're thinking of building and listen to their feedback.
Okay, we have actually run out of time and there's lots of people standing. So can we do a quick fire thing? Maybe just, 3 questions and then we'll try and answer whichever we can. We can start from there, please.
Right, hi. I actually run a global company right now, albeit a small one. Most of our clients are based in the US. And the thing is, currently, if we have a limited budget, do we put it into marketing in the US or do we put it into starting an office in the US? I mean, right now, we have a limited budget because we are funded by profit, really.
Marketing, no office.
Next one, please, over here.
My name is Tazam. I have a question for our audience here. How many of us here are programmers? Can you raise your hand? Okay. I think our challenge here is we lack of high-skilled talents on the software development side here in Malaysia. So from yesterday's keynote, we know that code is power. So if we don't have programmer, we don't have powers. What can we do about it?
If you don't have programmers, what can you do about it? Go get programmers.
There are a lot of places where you can learn how to code now on your own. Go to Codecademy, for example, .com. It's a place where any of us could learn how to code in a short time frame.
Okay. Next question over there, please. Quick question.
Hi, my name is Silmi. I'm a brand futurist and founder of Brand Geeks Incorporated. I just signed up to UNoodle Beta, and our passion is in helping entrepreneurs build out their brands. So this is, I would like to propose to Rebecca how we could work together in using the UNoodle platform to achieve that.
Talk to me afterwards.
That was just a request.
Thank you. It was a proposal.
Okay. Next, please.
Okay. My name is Abizar. I can, from the discussion, I can sense that that's a lot of emphasis on VC. But I wonder if we can really go global very fast without VC.
Can we go global fast without VCs? Without money? Let's say
Yeah,
without
venture
money.
capital, yes.
Yeah. So I think there is I think what you need to understand, or what I try to teach my entrepreneurs, is that if you receive money from VCs, you always need to return it. It is like a loan. You need to think of it that way. It's not money that's just going to come in here and you can just spend it and hope that it goes away. That's not how you need to perceive it, because if you take money, it's a big responsibility. So I often say, try to do it as far as you can on your own money and on a limited budget and travel cheap and make that money so you feel confident in your soul about your product that it's fine. And if you feel that this is going to be good, then it's also easy to attract investors, because they can see that through your eyes. Like, we're making money, this is going to happen, I'm going to change the world, and you get people on board. And that's just my advice. So I think, the VC part is important, but no one's going to put money into you if they don't really believe that you can change the world or do something else. That's and of course that's the hard part, because then you come back to a good product.
I have 2 words for you: Angry Birds. Go study their case, because they went global extremely fast at a time when they didn't really have investment from VC.
Okay, quick question.
Good morning. My name is Ganesan. I'm a Malaysian living in Tokyo for about 15 years. I'm trying very hard to come back to Malaysia, and I'm kind of lost, actually. So I'm just addressing everybody in the floor. If you guys want to be my friend, I'm here. Secondly, I would like to be on your all-star team, Dr. Siva. I talked to you last night, I think. Third, I'm trying to bring a bunch of VC from Japan to be interested this part of the world. So help me out. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ganesan. Yes, you've met me, so we can talk later. Last two questions.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Saurus, and first of all, I agree with you that overseas connection is very important. And just now, Jonas, you say that you recommend us to come to Silicon Valley as often as possible. But I think the problem here is due to currency exchange, traveling to US is very expensive. It costs at least a few months of salary in Malaysia. So for a startup with very little resources, how is it possible to travel so frequently to Silicon Valley? And even if it is, even if we have that resources, isn't it more strategic to just move to the Valley to start up the company? Thank you.
There are a lot of competitions, like if you go to Intel, challenge.com, there are many competitions like that that offer trips to Silicon Valley on top of a cash prize. So I would say do research on local competitions as well as global competitions that may give you the opportunity to travel.
Okay, over here please.
My name is Joshua Tang. Okay, so the question I want to ask is, this is a very cultural issue and things like that. So how do you actually stand out as an entrepreneur, say when you meet someone very brilliant, a venture capitalist or a fellow entrepreneur who really made it? How do you stand out from the noise, from the crowd?
I'd like to go back to the point I made about communication. And the one thing people ignore, and in spite of the fact that we learn it in school, is the ability to tell a story. And to tell a story, number one, you have to have great communication skills. And two, as Jonas says, you've got to be incredibly passionate about your story. And that's what really stands out. I mean, your story could be the same as somebody else's, but the amount of passion you put into it, the VC that is in front of you can tell from looking in your eyes whether you really believe in what you're doing. That's what you need to bring to the table.
Okay, the MC is saying I've got to cut off now, so I'm sorry I can't take any more questions, okay? Before we finish off, I'll just quickly sum up what the panel has discussed, but I'd like to ask the panel to just think about, after I finish, I'm going to ask you, if you have one single message you want to give the audience, what that message would be, okay? Just think about it while I sum up. So just to quickly sum up, from what the panel has discussed and from your questions, there are 5 or 6 aspects that are very important. Firstly is mindsets. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you want to go global, you've got to think global, you've got to act global, and you've got to be global as a company. And then you've got to build products that customers are going to absolutely love. This is the Steve Jobs thing, okay? And you have to tell better stories. I totally agree. I think Malaysians are not able to tell great stories. Sometimes you have a great idea or a great product, but you tell a lousy story, okay? And then you've got to innovate, and innovate by thinking 5 years ahead. What would people want 5 years from now, not what people want today? And if you don't have the money, you've got to go where the money is, okay? If you can't find it in Malaysia, go where it is, but you need to build connections and relationships to do that. And finally is that the team actually matters, the engineers and the coders matter a lot as well, okay? And now I will just ask all our panelists for that last one message that you would like to leave behind with the audience. Maybe we can start with Seong.
My message is to the country, to our government. Please bring English back. We need to tell stories.
Thank you. David?
My message is that many of you are still fairly young, probably doing your businesses for the first time entrepreneurs. Most first-time entrepreneurs fail, okay? And be prepared that you will fail, but start again. And you know, the more times you do this, the better your chances are of not only seeking funding, of building a successful company. So don't expect to have success in your first go.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then think this, last word, just go for it, you know. That's very simple, go for it. Have fun during the way. Work in a bank daytime, be an entrepreneur nighttime, you know. And that's, yeah.
Thank you, Jonas. Rebecca?
Yeah, I always say this. Steve Jobs is one of my personal heroes, and he used to say, if you think that today is the last day of your life, one day you'll be certainly right. So definitely live your life, follow your passions like it's your last day, and things will work out. They always do.
Okay, thank you very much to all our panelists. Can we give them a warm round of applause, the Malaysian way, please? Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you had a good time. I think the panelists had a good time. Enjoy the rest of your day today. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please come back here in about half an hour for our next session with Jeff Hoffman, the co-founder of Priceline, as well as for former CEO of Ubit. Thank you. Be back in half an hour. Thanks.